Carol, how are you?
I am fabulous. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Listen, my name is Dan Fantasia from Treeline Incorporated, and today I'm with my guest Carole Mahoney. Uh, Carol is just inspirational, and for those of you that don't know her, I thought it was just so wise and cool to do this LinkedIn Live event to meet her and also learn some tips and get some advice from her because she's written a new book that is just, I think, phenomenal. Carol is a keynote speaker. She's a LinkedIn top sales influencer, an entrepreneurial sales coach at Harvard Business School, founder of Unbound Growth, and author of the Amazon bestseller Buyer First. Here it
Woohoo!
is right here. It's good to see you, Carol. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's funny. Every time someone reads my bio or credentials, I kind of have this like pinch myself moment. Like, yeah, that's really you. That's who they're talking about.
you know, uh, when I obviously you and I have talked plenty of times,
Yeah.
but reading the book was it was inspirational, first of all.
Thank
But I think I mean, when I read it, it's real. I think it takes a lot of guts because not only do you share a lot about, sales, but personally your journey, to get where you are today. So I guess what I'd love to start with, if you don't mind,
you.
could you just tell everyone just a little story on your background and how you have arrived at this point in your career?
So the short story to my background is I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. And so like the idea of a 9 to 5 job was a foreign concept to me. And going to college and getting a degree and then going into corporate America was just not something my family did. So like my sister and I were one of the first to do that, I suppose. And I got into marketing, I studied marketing, and the real reason I went into marketing was because I hated the idea of sales, like the pushy, the slimy, the manipulation, the laundry list of tactics that change every other day or so. I just wanted nothing to do with that. And then when I went and worked in corporate America, my experience with the salespeople there didn't help my perception of sales any. And long story short, I ended up getting laid off from my corporate job in 2007, the height of the Great Recession. And I thought, you know what? I was so burned by the experience. I thought, I'm going to get my revenge by starting my business and being wildly successful. Except that a week before Christmas, I found myself in the grocery store with a credit card being declined and having to put the groceries back. And I'm like, I'm going to have to figure out how to sell. Like, marketing alone is not enough to take money to the bank. I have to actually say the 4-letter word of sale and figure out how to do it. And the challenge that I had, and you see all of the books behind me, all color coded, of all of the methodologies and processes and everything that I tried to learn how to teach myself how to do sales. Now, I will say this. Being a salesperson as a business owner is not the same game as being a salesperson selling someone else's product or service. There are a whole myriad of other things that happen in our mental capacity. The rejection is personal, the desperation is real, and that really has a big impact on our ability to sell. And I started to realize that what I was learning in these books wasn't necessarily applying to me because it didn't apply to my situation. But there aren't sales books or trainings out there that tell business owners how to sell and how to sell in a way that feels authentic and natural. And by the way, how buyers actually want to engage with salespeople. And so it was through my own trial and error and trying to figure out sales that I was finally able to come to the conclusion of here's how we can sell as business owners, as startup founders. And surprise, surprise, it also applies to salespeople selling in companies. And so that was why I went through and wrote the book and why I was so transparent in it. Because if you read a lot of sales books, it talks about how I did all of these things right and I made, $1 million in 6 months and these types of things. And then when you try to apply it and things don't go as it says in the book, you're like, all right, what am I doing wrong? And so I wanted to be really transparent with people and not say, look, I had to figure this out for myself the hard way. And then after figuring it out to a point, I started to understand some of the psychology and science that's underneath all of these tactics that I wanted to be able to share with people so that they could not only learn how to sell better with their buyers and feel better about the exchange, but also be able to rely on the methods of science to continue to improve by understanding why things work or why things don't work and what it is that we can do about it. And so, honestly, when I started writing the book, it was the book that I wish that I had 20 plus years ago when I started my business that didn't exist, and to a large degree until now didn't exist.
It's funny. There's so many nice tidbits to the book because you're coaching, but you're also talking about experiences you've had,
Yeah.
including car sales kind of experiences with
Yeah. We've all had those.
yeah. But negative experiences. And I think it's so interesting. Part of the book, you talk about changing the perception of sales, not necessarily outbound, but in your own mind, like justifying it, figuring out how to, like you said, start from nothing and learn how to sell and really start to build a methodology and grow an organization.
Yeah. And one of the things that I learned through this process and through the research for the book and in writing the book, and it became one of the subtitles or taglines for the book, is that the reason that so many of us, and when I say so many of us, there's still 50% of salespeople out there year after year who are barely making their numbers. So this doesn't just apply to small business owners, but that internal dialogue that we have, what really is happening is that we're bad at selling because we believe that selling is bad. And the psychological principles behind that, like there's the theory of planned behavior, the theory of reasoned action, which basically state it's our attitudes towards a behavior that will dictate if or how we'll even do that particular thing. So if you think that something is going to be, pushy and slimy and sleazy, but then you have to go do it, you're kind of like, all right, I have to do it this way, but we don't want to do it that way. And so we just keep perpetuating this cycle in sales because of our perceptions of it due to these psychological principles. And so if we can change how we think about sales, we can change how we act in sales, we can change other people's perceptions of sales.
Oh yeah, that is just, I love that. There's a quote I had it actually right here. Right here. It's at the very beginning, right, Carol? I mean, it says sales is not something you do to other people. It's something you do with them.
Yeah,
I love that.
I
I
know. I
love
was
it.
like, that was the realization that I came to, because like if you think about it, how much of sales tactics have been based on what someone else did at another company? I'm going to sell you on this thing. I'm going to convince you. I'm going to persuade you. I'm going to do these things to you. And when have you ever heard someone say with joy, okay, fine, you've sold me? Like it's said with resignation, not with, oh, thank goodness you've helped me with this kind of thing. Or I'm sold. All right, you can give up already. And when I started digging into the research and found that what buyers are asking for today, they're asking for people to give them insights and data into things that they didn't know or fully realize. They're asking people to give them the confidence and understanding, how do I make this decision in a way that is going to be the best possible decision? Because we're all afraid of making the wrong decision. And they want salespeople who are going to collaborate with them. Don't pitch me. Don't tell me what it is that I need to do, but actually work with me to figure out what the best solution for this problem is. And study after study and research after research shows that this is what buyers want. But yet we are still so focused in sales on what we have to do to get the sale and not what the buyer needs to do in order to make a decision and feel comfortable with it.
There's so much data. Not only is it personal,
Mm.
but there is a lot of data packed into this book. Matter of fact, you can see I've got it I got so I've got my thing
I need
highlighted.
a picture of that. I love sticky notes.
So I've got a bunch of things highlighted, of course. And there's just so much data. How long did it take you to write this book?
Uh, well, it took me 12 years,
Yeah.
in that it took me 12 years to get over myself, to not be afraid of what people are going to think. Like, I still remember the day, I think it was in like December. I was in Florida at a friend's house finishing the writing of the first draft of the book. And I still remember the day that I sat at my computer about to hit the send button to the publisher and thinking, oh crap, someone else is going to read this, someone who doesn't know me outside of me. But it took me about 10 years of stopping and starting again and gathering stories. And a lot of it was gathering the data and gathering the research and testing it out on myself and then testing it out with my clients, because I didn't just want this to be an academic theoretical type of a thing. I wanted this to be something that was based in methodologies of science and the scientific process, that used unbiased data in order to understand what performance is, and then was tested in the field, right? Because that's what we do in the scientific method. You have a hypothesis, you do your research, you run your test, and then you refine and revise. And so it was 10 years of refinement and revising and testing and over and over again, until finally I sat down, and it took me about, I want to say, a year and a half or so to actually go through all of the writing and all of the stories and all of the editing and all of the audio book and everything that it takes to actually get a book out there. But it was the 10 years before that, it was like, overnight.
Yeah, I think that's the point.
Right.
Like when you're reading it, um, you can see that you put the time. You've put. It's not something you whip together in a year.
No.
It is really, it's really well done, and there's you can tell that it's a passion of yours, and I give you a lot of credit. I mean, it takes a lot of guts, and it's a what a humongous accomplishment, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is a big deal. In the book, you talk about a framework. It's called "Not About Me," and I don't know if I want to. We don't have to share too much information here, but can
Yeah.
you give us an idea of what that, an overall idea of what the "Not About Me" framework looks like?
Yeah. It actually came from one of my coaching clients, Mauricio, who's out there. If you're listening, thank you for this phrase. But I was coaching Mauricio, and he kept coming back to, what do I need to do, and what products and features do I need to talk about? And he's so worried about his quota and pricing and margins and all of these things. And I'm like, Mauricio, your buyers do not care about any of that stuff, because it's not about you. You have to make this all about them. And in that, it is like all about them in terms of even the questions that you're asking. So many salespeople have these list of questions that they ask so that they can find out what they want to know in order to sell someone, instead of asking the questions that's going to help the buyer to understand something better or to see things in a different way. It serves them, not the buyer. And it's reflected in how we train salespeople. It's reflected in human nature. We're always concerned about, how is this going to impact me first and foremost? And so we almost, as salespeople, need to fight against our own nature in making it about ourselves, to intentionally put the focus on our buyers, to empathize with them, to put ourselves in their shoes, to understand the risks that are associated with them making this decision and what's at stake for them in doing so. And when we shift the focus and our intentions from ourselves and what it means to impact us and how is this going to, make us look, and we focus it instead on our buyers, it does a couple of things. It changes the way we interact. It changes the questions that we ask. It changes also even how we comport ourselves and how we present ourselves to our buyers. We're not worried about what they think about us. We're worried about, how can I help them? How can I understand them? And buyers sense that. Like, we all know when someone's not paying attention to us, when someone's not listening to us. Just even the presence of a cell phone in their hand is an indicator that they're not paying attention to us. And it's something that we need to be constantly reminded of. And so Mauricio said to me, he's like, I just need to get this tattooed on my forehead. And I'm like, you're not going to see it there. You're never going to get the reminder. And everybody's going to wonder what this thing is on your forehead. So I designed these t-shirts, and I have one around here somewhere, where it says "Not About Me," and it is upside down, so that when you are wearing it and you look down, you can see and get the reminder that it's not about you. And it's a constant reminder that we need. And there was even a study that was done in sales that showed that people who are new to sales and are under pressure to perform, that they tend to start focusing inwardly because they're dealing with that pressure. And as a result of that, that ethically, that they may sometimes cross the line of their own ethical standards in the effort to make this happen. And so we need that reminder to make it about the other person, so that we're not always focused on what we need to get out of this. And I believe that by making it not about me, we will change the perception of sales as being pushy and slimy and sleazy, and instead change it to the perception that even the doctors have today, where their main goal and focus is to help people with their problems and build those relationships. So that's kind of where the framework came from, me repeating myself over and over again to my clients that it's not about you, and then coming up with the t-shirt. And as soon as people see it, they kind of get it, but then they're like, can I get one for my neighbor? And like my mother-in-law.
I totally agree. You talk about pressure, right?
Mm,
In sales, there's a ton of pressure. Matter of fact, right now, right? The selling is tough right now, right?
It
And
is.
we're hearing it. We're talking to a lot of folks that are struggling in this particular market.
Mhm.
So when you feel all that pressure, there was a nice piece in this book. Talk about the placebo effect.
Yeah.
I think there was a quote: "Sales is not only a numbers game; it's a mental game." And I think it'd be helpful for some people that are listening that are, we're starting Q2
Mhm.
and maybe Q1 didn't go as well as they hoped for.
Right.
Um, but you need to give, well, I'll let you explain, right?
Yeah.
When you think of the placebo effect, how can you share some insight into that to everyone listening?
Yeah. So in the medical field, the placebo effect is basically, a placebo is you think you're getting medication for a particular thing, but it's really just a sugar pill. And so the placebo effect is that by believing in something and going through the routines of taking care of ourselves, we can create a placebo effect for ourselves, whereby we don't need to necessarily fix all of these external things or take this particular medication in order to get better. But in the placebo effect, the way that it actually works is that because people are going through these rituals and routines, they need to go somewhere, they need to report on what it is that they're doing, they need to follow certain steps, and that creates this placebo effect by going through these motions and honestly just taking better care of themselves and being accountable for that is what allowed them to actually start to feel better, like physically feel better. And we can do the same thing in sales with our own beliefs, our own mindsets, and our own pressure. Because what happens is that, in a business as an owner or a startup founder or a salesperson or leader or in a company, we have all of these pressures to perform. And what happens is that creates this stress within us. And when we're under a stressful situation, what happens is that we tend to take shortcuts. We don't think things through as much. We don't see things as clearly. And the stress impacts us physically. And there's no doubt out there at all that sales is one of the most stressful jobs out there. And so by applying the placebo effect to ourselves and managing our stress, taking better care of ourselves and the self-care side of things, we can actually mitigate some of that stress that happens and also start to change our own mindsets and belief systems around the things that we do. I think I used this metaphor in the book several times about, during the pandemic, I lost 105 pounds. Now, I had tried for the majority of my life to lose weight, to be healthy. I tried all of the diets, all of the things, like we try all of the sales processes and methodologies. But it wasn't until I actually started addressing the beliefs that I had and the mindsets that I had towards the weight and towards losing the weight that I started to adapt the self care habits that were actually going to help me to change things. And these happened in small ways. And so the placebo effect isn't something that you just wake up one day and say, okay, I'm going to do this. What it really is taking small steps every day to start to change some habits and some behaviors, become aware of how these belief systems don't actually help us, but actually hinder us, and start replacing those beliefs with something that's more supportive. So, for example, I use this silly example in the book of one of the exercises that I went through to lose the weight was called mindful eating. Now, I grew up in restaurants. You were forced to eat when you could, as fast as you could, and usually while you were doing like four other things. That belief system and habit carried over into my working from home life. And so even when I was taking a break to eat lunch, I would be sitting in front of my computer or my phone, answering emails, going through different things. And I wasn't fully present in the moment. I didn't realize how much I was eating or how fast I was eating. And so I was eating too much. And so by slowing down, taking breaks in between bites, sips of water in between bites, putting my fork down in between bites, I was forced to be more in the moment, which changed my brain's chemistry in terms of how quickly I felt full. We can do the same thing in sales. When we adopt certain self care routines and mindsets, it allows us to be more in the present with our buyers. It allows us to think of the questions that will come naturally to us because of our curiosity. We'll care less about what other people think of us and challenge our buyers when appropriate and ask those tough questions. We're able to recover from rejection more quickly. So we can apply a placebo effect in our sales mindsets through daily self care habits that not only help us feel better, it also changes us as human beings. Because was as I was going through this process for weight and then also going through this process for my own sales, I started to notice how it changed my other relationships with my kids, with my friends, with my husband. And so this placebo effect in sales doesn't just impact our ability to sell with our buyers, it changes our relationships with everyone else. Because who you are as a person doesn't change when you try to go and sell. At least it shouldn't.
It's so simple. It seems so basic,
I
but
know.
right? Like for me, for example, you are running hard and you're working, like, just to your point exactly.
Yeah.
And I remember with my business coach, he said, what is your goal to take time off this year? And
Mm,
I said, I have no idea. I don't have a goal for time off. I've got all these other goals, but time off was not one of them.
hmm.
And those small things, sometimes you need a person like you, Carole, just to shake you a little bit, to give yourself a break. I think there was another
Yeah.
quote. I have it in here. There was another quote about like giving yourself a break.
Yeah.
But what,
I did the same thing. Like when
right?
I first started my business, I didn't take a vacation for 12 years. I didn't take a day off for 2 years straight. And I thankfully had a group of women. Shout out to Lori Richardson and everyone in the Women's Sales Pros. I think it was actually Nancy who said, "You're not allowed to come back here until you take a vacation." And now I am like the vacation queen.
But it's hard. Like you have to adopt that mindset. Like you said,
Yep.
it's small, the small things that really matter. And sometimes if you're in sales and you're selling right now and you're struggling, a book like this can help you reset a little bit.
Yeah. I've
There
had
was, oh
people
good,
that
yeah.
I had someone actually message me a couple of weeks ago, and I was kind of like, oh my God. And they said, not only did you just save my business, but you've given me a new light as to how I look at sales. It's like I feel like I'm reawakened
Mhm.
to the possibility in sales again. And that I never would have imagined or hoped for that to be the outcome of the book, but that's what I'm starting to hear from people is that I have a fresh perspective on what sales is really all about. And this is sometimes from people who've been in sales for 30 years. And they're like, "Thank you." Like I kind of call this like this is the renaissance of sales age. Like this is where we are right now. And just like then, where by using the scientific method and putting people first, we can change how in the trajectory and how sales is perceived so that who knows, maybe one day sales will be as trusted as the medical profession is to a degree. That's another whole topic right there.
The I think there was also something you mentioned. You had to decide. You mentioned you lost a significant amount of weight, but
Yes.
you had to this. You tried all kinds of different things, but you had to find the plan that worked best for you. It's kind
Mm,
of like reading all the different sales books that are out there.
yeah.
And maybe yours is the perfect one for a person, maybe it's not. But the idea is you have to find it yourself. Is that right?
You do. And not only it's not just about finding it for yourself. This is one of the things that I tried to stress a lot in the book. One of the things that I get frustrated with is when say, you know what, you need to just follow this step-by-step process. It's worked for everyone else, it's going to work for you. But that's not realistic because we're all unique human beings with different perspectives, different experiences. And so what might work for someone doesn't necessarily work for someone else, even if it looks like they're in the same kind of circumstance, because we all think a little bit differently. And so what it is yes, you need a system that's best for you, but the one that's going to be best for you is the one that is designed by you. There's a story in the book I talk about. My friend Judy was a professional organizer. And even if you could see my office now, there's like little piles of paperwork everywhere still. But she came in and I'm like, all right, so what do I need to do? What's the process I need to follow to be more organized? And she's like, it doesn't work that way. There is no perfect process for you to be organized. It's understanding what are your tendencies and then how do we account for those tendencies in the process so that you're not fighting against yourself, you're working with your own tendencies. So it's more about and every book that you read and every person that you listen to is being able to say, all right, how am I going to pull this one small thing and how am I going to apply that to myself and my daily habits? Because losing the weight and changing your perceptions of sales, improving your skills in sales to sell with buyers, it happens through small little incremental changes that you build on. And so if you think you're going to follow someone else's perfect process and see the exact same results, you're going to be sorely disappointed. But if you go into it with the expectation of, I'm going to figure out how to adjust this process to work for me in my circumstance and situation, then you're going to be more likely to be successful with it because it's unique to you.
Yeah, and the it's so true, right? It just takes that time. There's so much of this book too that I love. including all the workbooks. Like there's so much. It's not just a book, there's exercises and workbooks. And there's another, what is the website? Do you share that website
Yeah,
where all those
it's
workbooks
the,
are?
I think it's the bit.ly buyer first workbook, is the where you can get all the worksheets for the book once you get into it.
Yeah.
So those are up on the carolemahoney.com website as well. And so if you go to that bit.ly URL, I believe that's the right one. But because, it's one of those things where it's not enough to read something, you have to be able to apply it right away. Like this is the adult learning theory model at work. It's not enough to just theoretically learn something. It will stick with you if you can find a way to apply it right away. And that's why I put so many exercises and workbooks and worksheets in the book itself, so that people could go through it and start applying it in small ways to themselves. Because as soon as you start to apply something different and you don't see a result from it, what's your likely response? That didn't work. I'm not going to try that again. But as you start to get those small little wins in, you start to build confidence in more change and bigger change. And now you start to get a little bit more daring, and you start to step outside of your comfort zone. So by having these small exercises and ways that people can apply it right away, my goal was to be able to help them to build the confidence that, yes, you can do this. You can change the way that you sell with your buyers so that you can get to your own personal goals.
When you talk about personal goals, I think there was a quote, I got it here actually: set your goals, not someone else's.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about that, it's a negative outlook is kryptonite to almost anything we are trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so when it comes to setting goals, do you coach? Are you coaching on helping people set their goals, or what is your perspective?
So when I'm coaching with people, the very first exercise I go through with them is this personal goal setting exercise. And the worksheets that I share in the book are the same worksheets that I use with clients. And I encourage them to modify them as they need to, so long as it still follows a process whereby you're thinking about your goals. Like we all do that. We daydream, we envision the future that we want. And for most of us, it stops there. The rest of the people, when they start writing it down, sharing it with other people, creating plans and commitments and how they're going to make it happen, and then reporting back to people on their progress and seeking advice for those things, those are the people who are 298% more likely to be elite, to be the ones that reach their goals. So goals aren't this like, I want to make $1 million next year. It's how much, or what is it that you want to accomplish in your life? What do you want your day-to-day life to be like? How is that align with what your values are? And creating a personally meaningful goals, it's one of those things where it's like you get up in the morning excited to face the day so that you can take the next step towards your goals. Ironically, just yesterday, we sent the plans to an architect for us to build the garage and addition, to put solar panels, to get completely off of the grid for the house, which is something I've been trying to get to for at least as long as I've been trying to finish the book. And so this is something that's personally meaningful to me because I grew up in a family of people who lived outdoors. And so being environmentally sustainable and as friendly as possible while also being self-sufficient is something that is personally meaningful to me. So the dollars that it takes in order for me to achieve that, it's not about the dollars. It's about what the dollars allow me to experience, allow me to be, allow me to have. And that's what I mean by personally meaningful. Your quota is not a meaningful goal. Paying off your bills and your debts, probably not as meaningful as something that's going to give you joy. Like who wakes up in the morning excited to pay their taxes and student loans? Nobody. So find the thing that's going to bring you joy, that means something to you. Like, for me, it's, RVing across the country with my family to go hiking in the national parks, getting my home completely off of the grid, leaving as little of a carbon footprint as I possibly can. Those are the things that are meaningful to me. Those are the things that will put my feet on the floor every morning when I don't feel like getting up, but also will bring me joy as I start getting closer to it. And so like, as we were sending these things off, I'm like, finally. And then I'm like, okay, now what? What's next?
So when are you writing the book on getting off the grid?
That might be one of my other side pet projects. Like I might have to on my Instagram start posting about, getting off the grid and organic gardening. And, when all of the, what hits the fan, are you going to be like, I'm a doomsday prepper all the way.
Yeah.
So that's who I am.
I love it. Well, listen, I mean, your book is awesome, and you can see it now. Like you weave your personal experiences in with data and science, and it's awesome. If you've enjoyed this conversation or listening to Carole, then you will definitely like the book. I mean, it is a great book. So, Carole, where can people find you? Is there anything you can share and information on where to get the book?
Yeah, so if you go to carolemahoney.com, and don't forget the E at the end of Carole and the E before the Y in Mahoney. So CaroleMahoney. People forget those. That's where you can buy the book. And also, if you buy the book this year, I'm doing one tomorrow. We're doing a book club every month for an hour. So anyone who shows up, ask any question that you want, get coaching on any type of a scenario that you want. Because again, my mission is to put this in the hands of the people who need it and help them to apply it. So you can sign up for that on carolemahoney.com. Just go to the books tab. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. If you can't find me on LinkedIn, then I'm definitely not doing something right.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Carole. I
Thanks
appreciate
for
it.
having me, Dan. This was so fun.
Thank you.